The Grand Deception. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Orbital Defense Station Alpha, watching as another defense satellite powered down. Its lights flickered and died, joining the growing constellation of dark, defunct platforms surrounding Earth. Each deactivated system felt like a knife in her heart, but she knew it was necessary. "Status report," she commanded, not turning from the view. Lieutenant Rodriguez cleared his throat. "We're at 60% decommission, Admiral. The Eastern Hemisphere grid is completely dark, and we're proceeding with Western Hemisphere shutdown as scheduled." Sarah nodded, her reflection in the reinforced glass showing no emotion. The plan was working perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. Below, Earth's oceans gleamed blue and innocent, hiding humanity's greatest secret. "Any activity from the Vexian monitoring posts?" "Yes, ma'am. Their observation vessels have increased by 30% since we began the decommissioning. They're watching exactly as predicted." A ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's face. The Vexians, insectoid warriors who had fought Earth to a standstill just 5 years ago, were taking the bait. Their ships lurked at the edges of the solar system, recording every defense platform they shut down, every warship they seemingly scrapped. The truth was far different. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a command center few knew existed, Operation Tidewake was entering its final phase. Each decommissioned defense platform was actually being transferred to underwater facilities. Every scrapped warship was being modified for subsea deployment. Earth wasn't disarming, it was transforming its entire defense strategy. The real genius of the plan lay in its audacity. Who would believe that humanity had constructed vast underwater hangars? Who would suspect that Earth's oceans now concealed more firepower than every space-based platform combined? "Ma'am," Rodriguez interrupted her thoughts, "we have an incoming transmission from Tidewake Command." Sarah finally turned from the viewport. "Put it through to my private office." Inside her office, the holographic display showed Admiral James Wong, the architect of Tidewake. His weathered face showed both exhaustion and excitement. "Sarah, the Mariana facility is online. We've successfully docked the entire Pacific Fleet underwater. The modification teams are working around the clock. And the new propulsion systems?" James grinned. "Better than we hoped. The tests show the ships can transition from underwater to space operations in under 3 minutes. The enemy won't know what hit them." Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering the implications. "The Vexians think we're weak, James. They're watching us dismantle our defenses and probably planning their next move. But what about the other threat?" James's expression darkened. "Our deep space sensors detected unusual activity near the Kuiper Belt. The patterns match historical records of Zoral bioship movements." Sarah felt her blood run cold. The Zoral, a hive mind species that used living ships, had nearly destroyed Earth a century ago. Everyone thought they had been eliminated, but if they were returning? "Both threats at once," she murmured. "Maybe that's better. They'll both think we're defenseless." "The Abyssal Armada will be ready," James assured her. "A million ships, hidden beneath the waves, waiting for the perfect moment. The real challenge is keeping the secret. The public is getting restless." Sarah understood their fear. From their perspective, Earth was systematically dismantling its defenses, leaving them vulnerable to any alien threat. Protests had broken out in major cities. Military veterans were speaking out against the apparent disarmament. Even some high-ranking officials were questioning the strategy. If they only knew. The door chimed, and Rodriguez entered with a tablet. "Admiral, we've detected increased communication between Vexian vessels. They're using their quantum channels heavily." "They're planning something," Sarah said. "Good. Let them plan. Let them think we're naive enough to believe in lasting peace." She turned to the hologram of James. "Accelerate the timeline. I want every ship ready within 2 months." 2 months. James looked shocked. The original plan called for 6. Plans change, old friend. Something's coming. I can feel it. We need to be ready sooner rather than later. After the transmission ended, Sarah returned to the viewport. More defense platforms were going dark, their shutdown sequence looking like retreat to any watching eyes. But beneath the oceans, humanity's true power was growing. The abyssal armada would change everything. Traditional space warfare doctrine assumed ships would approach from space, would fight in space. No one had ever considered an attack from below, millions of warships erupting from Earth's oceans, already behind enemy lines. Sarah touched the cool glass, watching her planet rotate slowly below. Come on, she whispered to their unseen enemies. Come test our defenses. Come see how weak we've become. In the darkness of space, Vexian ships continued their observation, their insectoid crews preparing reports for their queen. And somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit, something ancient and terrible was stirring, its bioships beginning a long journey toward Earth. The greatest deception in human history was working perfectly. Too perfectly, perhaps. Because when the trap finally sprung, it would trigger a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Sarah just hoped they could keep the secret long enough for the trap to work. As if in answer to her thoughts, another defense platform went dark, its lights fading like a dying star. Above it, a Vexian observation ship adjusted its position, recording everything, understanding nothing. The game was on. The pieces were in motion. And beneath Earth's oceans, a million ships waited in the darkness, ready to rise, the gathering storm. Dr. Elena Santos hadn't slept in 36 hours. The deep-sea monitoring station at the bottom of the Mariana Trench hummed around her as she studied the latest data streams. Something was wrong with the readings, but she couldn't quite place what. Coffee? Dr. Marcus Way appeared beside her workstation, holding 2 steaming cups. Thanks, she muttered, taking one without looking away from her screens. Marcus, look at these resonance patterns. They're not matching any of our baseline data. Marcus leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he studied the wavelength displays. The abyssal armada's million ships were supposed to be in perfect hibernation, their systems barely registering on even the most sensitive equipment. But these readings. The ships are becoming active, he said finally. But that's impossible. The activation codes haven't been sent. Elena pulled up more data, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. It's not coming from our commands. The ships are reacting to something else. Something, out there. High above them, in the vacuum of space, that something was approaching. The Zoral bioship fleet moved as one organism, each vessel connected to the others through a vast psychic network. At their center, the consciousness directed their movement with singular purpose. The prey weakens, the thought echoed through the hive mind. Their defenses fall. They remember us not, the massive fleet had already passed Neptune's orbit, their organic hulls adapting to the increasing solar radiation as they drew closer to their target. Within the biological corridors of the command ship, the consciousness observed feeds from their advanced scouts. Earth's orbital defenses were indeed being dismantled, piece by piece. They invite their doom, the consciousness pulsed. But what of the waters? The question rippled through the hive mind. A century ago, during their first invasion attempt, the Zoral had avoided Earth's oceans. Their bioships, though incredibly advanced, were not designed for underwater combat. Something about the deep waters had always felt wrong. In the Vexian High Command Chamber, Queen Zth Raka received the latest intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing Earth's systematic disarmament. Magnificent, she chittered to her advisors. They truly believe peace is possible. That we would forget their resistance, their defiance. High Commander Crix clicked his mandibles in agreement. The Zoral approach on schedule, my queen. Our sensors detect their fleet will reach Earth's moon in approximately 48 Earth hours. And the humans suspect nothing. They believe their old enemy destroyed. Their orbital defenses are at minimal capacity. Their space fleet is reduced to a token force. Crixa's antennae twitched with amusement. They are blind to their doom. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Elena Santos was starting to piece together a terrifying puzzle. The resonance patterns affecting the dormant abyssal armada were getting stronger. She pulled up historical records, comparing wavelengths and frequencies. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "These patterns, they match recordings from the First Zoral War. The ships are reacting to Zoral bioships." Marcus stared at her, his coffee forgotten. "That's impossible. The Zoral were wiped out." "Apparently not." Elena initiated a priority communication to command. "And there's something else. The patterns suggest a fleet far larger than anything recorded in the First War. They're coming, Marcus. They're coming in force." In orbit, Admiral Sarah Chen received Elena's report with grim satisfaction. The trap was about to be sprung, but not quite how they'd planned. The Vexians were supposed to be their primary target, with the Abyssal Armada revealing itself to counter their inevitable invasion. The return of the Zoral complicated everything. "Status of the Armada," she demanded. "All ships at 98% readiness," her tactical officer reported. "The underwater modifications exceed specifications." "But ma'am, the civilian population is getting more restless. There were riots in New Singapore this morning." Sarah understood their fear. From the public's perspective, Earth was virtually defenseless. And now they had not one but two deadly enemies approaching, the Vexians watching from the shadows, and the Zoral streaming in from deep space. In her private quarters, Sarah accessed the most classified files in Earth's military database. Contingency plans within contingency plans. The Abyssal Armada wasn't just a fleet, it was an entirely new form of warfare. Each ship was designed to transition seamlessly from underwater to space combat, using the ocean's pressure to power revolutionary propulsion systems. But they had never planned to face both the Vexians and the Zoral simultaneously. "Send word to all tide wake facilities," she ordered. "Begin power-up sequences. Minimal emissions only. We need to stay dark until the last possible moment." As her orders were relayed to the underwater bases, Sarah studied the tactical displays. The Zoral fleet would reach Earth in 2 days. The Vexians, watching Earth's apparent weakness, would likely strike simultaneously, hoping to claim their share of the spoils. They had no idea they were swimming into humanity's carefully prepared trap. In the Mariana facility, Elena and Marcus worked frantically to decode more of the Zoral communications their sensors were detecting. The bioship's organic nature made their signals different from conventional transmissions, but patterns were emerging. "They're coordinating," Elena realized. "The Zoral and the Vexians, they're working together." But that's not possible. The Vexians hate all other species. They barely tolerate trading with humans. Marcus pulled up more data. Unless they never plan to work together long-term. The Vexians might be using the Zoral as a weapon, pointing them at Earth and standing back to watch the destruction. Elena felt cold despite the humid air of the underwater facility. Around them, the enormous hangar housed thousands of Earth's most advanced warships, each one waiting silently in the pressurized darkness. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see their shapes. Sleek, deadly, and powered by technology that had remained secret for decades. "How many civilians will die?" she whispered. "Before we can reveal our defenses, before we can strike back, how many will we lose?" Marcus had no answer. Above them, separated by kilometers of ocean, the Zoral fleet continued its approach. Earth's apparent weakness had drawn in not one but two powerful enemies, each believing they were about to claim an easy victory. The trap was set. But as Elena studied the increasing resonance patterns, she wondered if they had underestimated their opponents. The Abyssal Armada was humanity's greatest achievement, but would it be enough against two alien armadas? The answer would come soon enough. In just 48 hours, the greatest space battle in human history would begin. And it would start not in space, but from the depths of Earth's oceans. Engineering reports all systems green, her XO reported. Pressure seals at maximum efficiency. We can transition to space operations on your command. Maya nodded, studying the readouts. The Abyssal Armada represented humanity's greatest technological achievement, not just the ships themselves, but the massive underwater facilities that housed them. For decades, Earth had secretly constructed these bases, hiding them in the deepest trenches, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. That day had arrived. In orbit, the Zorro made their first move. Biological projectiles, living weapons that looked like enormous spores, began raining down on Earth's major cities. But where they expected to find helpless populations, they instead encountered something unexpected: empty streets, abandoned buildings, and heavily shielded underground shelters. The evacuation had been completed days ago, though the public hadn't known the real reason. They thought it was just another civil defense drill. Zorro bombardment having minimal effect, Rodriguez reported. Civilian casualties less than 1%. Shield systems holding at 90%. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Zorro, expecting to find Earth defenseless, had committed their forces to an all-out assault. Now they were locked in position, their bioship spread thin across the orbit. Perfect. Signal the Vexians, she ordered. Send the prepared message. Across the void of space, encrypted quantum channels carried Earth's apparent surrender to the Vexian fleet. Queen Zth Raka received the transmission with cruel satisfaction, her compound eyes gleaming as she read the desperate pleading of her supposed victims. They beg for mercy, she chittered to her commanders. They offer unconditional surrender if we protect them from the Zorro. High Commander Crix clicked his mandibles in amusement. Shall we accept their surrender, my queen? Yes, she decided. Let them think we will save them. Move the fleet into low orbit. We will destroy the Zorro, and then eliminate what remains of humanity. The Vexian warships began their approach, their crystalline hulls catching the sunlight like faceted jewels. They positioned themselves between Earth and the Zorro fleet, weapons charging, shields raising. In the Mariana facility, Elena Santos watched the power readings with growing anxiety. The Abyssal Armada's million ships were humming with contained energy, their revolutionary engines ready to transform water pressure into something that would change the face of warfare forever. Energy signature of the Vexian fleet is massive, Marcus reported beside her. They're not holding anything back. They think this is their moment of triumph. Elena nodded, her fingers dancing across the control panels. The Zorro are responding. Their bioships are releasing some kind of organic plasma. Temperature readings are off the scale. Above them, space itself seemed to burn as the two alien armadas engaged. Vexian energy weapons sliced through Zorro bioships, releasing clouds of organic matter that quickly crystallized in the vacuum. The Zorro responded with living weapons that attached themselves to Vexian hulls, boring through their crystalline structure. It was chaos. It was destruction on an unprecedented scale, and it was exactly what humanity had planned for. All facilities, prepare for Phase 2, Sarah's voice echoed through the underwater command centers. Initiation in 5 minutes. Maya Patel felt her heart racing as she gave the orders to her fleet. 5,000 ships, hidden beneath the Atlantic, powering up their revolutionary engines. Similar scenes were playing out in facilities across Earth's oceans, the Mediterranean, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, even beneath the polar ice caps. The Abyssal Armada was about to reveal itself. In orbit, the battle between the Vexian and Zorro fleets reached a fever pitch. Neither side noticed the subtle changes in Earth's oceans below. They didn't detect the enormous power signatures building in the depths, masked by the chaos of their own combat. Phase 2 initiating, Sarah announced. All ships, prepare for emergency surface breach. Weapons free, combat protocols engaged. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the thrumming of her ship's engines through the deck plates. This is Captain Patel to all Atlantic Division vessels. Prepare for breakthrough. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. Across Earth's oceans, the water began to churn. The trap was about to be sprung, and neither the Vexians nor the Zoral would ever know what hit them. Humanity's greatest deception was about to become humanity's greatest triumph. Above, aliens fought aliens in the darkness of space. Below, in the depths of Earth's oceans, humanity's real power waited to rise, the rising tide. The oceans of Earth began to boil. Not from heat, but from movement, massive, coordinated movement that started in the deepest trenches and spread across every major body of water on the planet. In low orbit, both the Vexian and Zoral fleets paused their combat as their sensors detected unprecedented disturbances in the waters below. Energy signatures are off the scale, Marcus Wade reported from his station in the Mariana facility. All Armada vessels reporting ready for breakthrough. Transition systems are green across the board. Elena Santos watched in awe as the largest military operation in human history began. On her screens, 1,000,000 points of light represented the abyssal Armada's ships, each one about to perform a maneuver that would rewrite the rules of space warfare. In her command center, Admiral Sarah Chin gave the final order, execute Operation Tide Wake. All ships, commence breakthrough. The ocean's surface exploded. Not in one place, but everywhere. Thousands of vessels burst from the waters simultaneously, their specialized hulls converting water pressure into propulsive energy. They didn't launch like traditional rockets, they erupted like geysers, riding columns of hypercompressed water that instantly vaporized into plasma trails behind them. The sight was magnificent and terrifying. In the Vexian command ship, Queen Zth-Raka's compound eyes widened in shock. Impossible, she chittered, watching as more and more ships emerged from Earth's oceans. Their fleet was destroyed. Their defenses dismantled. High Commander Crix's mandibles clacked in panic. My queen, we're detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our database. These are not standard human vessels, they're something new. The Zoral consciousness pulsed with confusion and alarm. Its bioships, spread thin across Earth's orbit, began to cluster together defensively. The prey has teeth, the thought rippled through the hive mind. The water's birth warriors. Captain Maya Patel felt the exhilaration of breakthrough as her ship, along with thousands of others, transitioned from deep-sea operation to spaceflight in seconds. The revolutionary engines, powered by the immense pressure of the ocean depths, provided them with acceleration that conventional spacecraft couldn't match. Atlantic Division, form up on combat vectors, she ordered. Target Vexian support vessels first. Don't let them regroup. The human fleet moved with precision that stunned their alien opponents. These weren't just warships, they were submarine spacecraft hybrids, designed to utilize water pressure as both propellant and weapon. As they reached orbit, they began firing specialized torpedoes that carried bubbles of hypercompressed seawater, which exploded into devastating shock waves in the vacuum of space. Mediterranean fleet engaging Zoral bioships, came the reports. Pacific Division moving to cut off their retreat vectors. Indian Ocean Squadron beginning encirclement maneuvers. The aliens found themselves caught in humanity's trap. The Vexians' crystalline ships, while powerful, were vulnerable to the pressure-based weapons. The Zoral bioships, designed to regenerate from energy weapon impacts, had no defense against the physical force of compressed water explosions, but humanity's greatest advantage was psychological. Both alien species had committed their forces based on the assumption that Earth was weakened, nearly defenseless. Instead, they faced 1,000,000 ships appearing from what they had thought was merely an obstacle, Earth's oceans. Zoral bioships attempting to link into larger forms, Rodriguez reported to Admiral Chen. Vexian fleet shifting to defensive formations. Sarah nodded. Execute Phase 3. Release the Leviathans. In the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, something even larger began to stir. The Leviathans were the crown jewels of the Abyssal Armada, massive carrier vessels larger than anything humanity had ever built in space. They had remained hidden until now, waiting for this precise moment. Elena and Marcus watched their sensors as the first Leviathan broke the surface. It was over 5 kilometers long, its hull designed to channel the ocean's pressure into defensive shield stronger than anything achievable with conventional technology. As it rose, doors along its length opened, releasing swarms of smaller craft. The Leviathan's pressure shield is holding, Elena reported excitedly. Power systems at optimal levels. It's working exactly as designed. In orbit, the battle had become chaotic. The Vexian fleet, its careful formations shattered by the unexpected attack, began to fragment. Individual ship commanders, panicking at the sight of the massive human fleet, broke ranks and attempted to retreat. The Zoral responded differently. Their bioships merged into larger and larger forms, creating enormous organic battleships that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. But even these monstrous creatures found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number of human vessels and their unconventional weapons. "My queen," Crix's voice shook as he addressed Zth Raka, "we're losing containment on multiple ships. Their weapons, the pressure waves are shattering our crystal matrices faster than we can regenerate them." The Vexian queen's antennae trembled with rage and fear. The humans had deceived them completely. What they had interpreted as weakness had been an elaborate trap, and now they were paying the price. The Zoral consciousness reached a similar conclusion. The waters were their strength, it pulsed to its collective. We did not see. We did not understand. Maya Patel's fleet engaged a cluster of Vexian cruisers, their pressure torpedoes creating spheres of destruction that cracked the alien ship's crystalline hulls. "Push them back," she ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The battle continued to unfold across Earth's orbit, but the outcome was becoming clear. Humanity's deception had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. The Abyssal Armada, hidden for so long beneath the waves, was proving to be more than a match for both alien forces. But victory would not come without cost. Some human ships were destroyed by Vexian energy beams or consumed by Zoral biological weapons. The space around Earth became littered with debris from all three civilizations, crystal shards, organic matter, and human technology all floating together in the void. From her command center, Sarah Chen watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The trap had been sprung perfectly, but the battle was far from over. The Vexians were cornered, and the Zoral were wounded, and that made both species even more dangerous. "All ships," she broadcast across the fleet, "prepare for final engagement. The enemy is desperate now. Stay alert. Stay focused. Remember your training." The greatest space battle in human history was reaching its climax, and the waters of Earth continued to churn as more ships rose to join the fight. The final wave. Space itself seemed to shudder as the Zoral command ship, a twisted mass of organic material nearly 10 kilometers long, began its final transformation. Smaller bioships were absorbed into its structure, their living matter reforming into new weapons and defenses. The resulting entity pulsed with malevolent purpose, its surface covered in writhing tentacles and organic plasma weapons. "By all the stars," Marcus breathed, watching the sensor readings from the Mariana facility. "The Zoral are creating something we've never seen before. The energy readings are beyond anything in our database." Elena's fingers flew across her console, analyzing the data. "They're desperate. They're burning through their own biomass to power these transformations. They can't maintain this for long." In orbit, the battle had reached a fever pitch. The Abyssal Armada's million ships had successfully split the alien forces, preventing the Vexians and Zoral from coordinating their attacks. But both enemies were far from defeated. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the tactical displays, her expression grim. Status of the Leviathans. All 6 vessels have surfaced and are in position, Rodriguez reported. Shield systems are holding at maximum power. The pressure reservoirs are charged and ready. Sarah nodded. The Leviathans represented humanity's ultimate weapon, massive carriers that could channel the concentrated pressure of Earth's deepest oceans into devastating attacks. They had never been tested in actual combat until now. Begin final approach, she ordered. All fleet elements, execute Pattern Omega. In her ship above the Atlantic, Captain Maya Patel watched as the massive human fleet began its coordinated movement. It was like a deadly dance, with groups of ships moving in perfect synchronization, herding their enemies into carefully planned killing zones. The Vexian fleet, its crystalline ships glittering in the sunlight, attempted to counter the maneuver. Queen Zth Raka, watching her forces being systematically destroyed, made one final, desperate decision. Initiate crystal fusion, she commanded. All ships, combine power cores. We will show these humans the true might of the Vexian Empire. The remaining Vexian vessels began to link together, their crystalline structures merging into a massive geometric shape that blazed with contained energy. It was their civilization's ultimate weapon, a technique that would destroy everyone and everything in Earth's orbit, including themselves. Energy spike detected in the Vexian formation, Elena reported urgently. They're creating some kind of quantum resonance field. If they complete that fusion, they'll take us all with them, Marcus finished grimly. But Sarah Chen had anticipated even this. Execute Protocol Deep Strike, she ordered. All Leviathans, release your pressure reserves. Now. The 6 Leviathan carriers, positioned strategically around Earth's orbit, activated their primary weapons simultaneously. They had spent months collecting and compressing water from the deepest ocean trenches, storing it in specialized chambers. Now, they released that pressure in focused beams, creating zones of impossible force that distorted space itself. The effect on the Vexian crystal fusion was catastrophic. The pressure beams disrupted the delicate quantum harmonics, shattering the combined ships into billions of crystal fragments that sparkled like diamond dust in the void. Queen Zth Raka's final scream of rage was cut short as her command ship crumbled around her. But the Zorro were not finished. Their massive combined form, now resembling a living planet more than a ship, launched a devastating counterattack. Biological weapons that defied understanding poured from its surface, living missiles that could think and adapt, organic beams that could penetrate any conventional shield. All ships, evasive action. Maya ordered as she watched several human vessels fall to the onslaught. Concentrate fire on the central mass. The abyssal armada responded with everything they had. Pressure torpedoes, gravitational weapons, and concentrated beams of superheated plasma struck the Zoral entity from all directions. The space around Earth became a maelstrom of energy, matter, and destruction. In the Mariana facility, Elena made a crucial discovery. The Zoral entity, it's maintaining its form through some kind of psychic field. The individual ships are still in there, still connected to the hive mind. If we could disrupt that connection. The pressure waves, Marcus realized. They're not just affecting physical matter, they're creating ripples in spacetime itself. If we modulate the frequency. Sarah Chen received their analysis and made an instant decision. All Leviathans, recalibrate pressure beams to these frequencies. Target the center of the Zoral mass. Fire on my mark. The 6 massive carriers adjusted their weapons, coordinating their attacks with precision that would have been impossible with conventional vessels. The compressed power of Earth's oceans, channeled through technology decades ahead of anything their enemies had imagined, prepared to strike. Fire. The combined pressure beams struck the Zoral entity like the hammer of an angry god. The psychic field maintaining its form shattered, and the massive organic structure began to break apart. Individual bioships, suddenly disconnected from the hive mind, tumbled helplessly in space. The waters, the waters. The Zoral consciousness's final thought echoed weakly through the void before dissolving into nothingness. The battle was over. Earth's orbit was filled with debris, crystal shards from the Vexian fleet, organic matter from the Zoral bioships, and the scattered remnants of human vessels lost in the fighting. But the Abyssal Armada had achieved something unprecedented, total victory against two of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "Stand down to condition yellow," Sarah ordered, her voice showing fatigue for the first time. "Begin recovery operations. I want every piece of alien technology collected and analyzed." In the weeks that followed, humanity began to emerge from its shelters, looking up at skies that now held a very different meaning. The truth about the Abyssal Armada was finally revealed to the public, along with the full story of how Earth had deceived its enemies into underestimating its strength. The oceans, once seen merely as barriers between continents, were recognized as humanity's greatest asset. The underwater facilities were expanded, and the technology that had made the Abyssal Armada possible was adapted for peaceful purposes as well as defense. Elena and Marcus, their research now declassified, began working on new applications for their pressure-based technology. The ability to harness and control the fundamental forces of nature had opened doors they had never imagined. Maya Patel was promoted to admiral, tasked with overseeing the new combined space-sea defense force. The lessons learned from the battle would shape human military doctrine for generations to come. And Sarah Chen, the architect of humanity's greatest victory, stood at her favorite viewport one last time before retiring. The Earth turned slowly below, its oceans gleaming in the sunlight. Those same oceans had hidden humanity's strength, had powered their weapons, had made possible a victory that would be remembered for centuries. The stars seemed different now. Humanity had proven itself more than capable of defending its home. And if any other threats emerged from the depths of space, they would find not a weakened civilization, but a united human race that had learned to turn its very environment into an advantage. The waters of Earth had protected them. And they would continue to do so, holding secrets and strength that any future enemy would underestimate at their peril.